At my mom's funeral, my aunt whispered something that broke me. The rain started as a whisper, just a few soft drips against the black roof of my car as I parked in front of the old church. I had been driving for hours, though the distance was hardly far enough to account for the exhaustion that had settled in my bones. Maybe it wasn't the miles, but the anticipation, the dread that had made every muscle tense from my shoulders to my jaw. Mom was gone. That word, gone, had started to feel almost unreal in the weeks after her sudden heart attack. And now I was here, standing on the brink of the finality that a funeral demanded. I opened the car door, and the smell of wet earth mixed with incense reached me even before I stepped onto the slick cobblestones. The church was a stoic monument in the gray afternoon, its spire slicing through the low clouds like a silent sentinel. Inside, I could hear the low murmur of voices blending with the subtle echo of footsteps on the marble floor. The wooden pews glistened under the dim light filtering through stained glass windows, painted in deep blues and reds, angels frozen mid-motion in eternal reverence. I swallowed hard, forcing my legs to move forward, to join the crowd that had already begun to gather in solemn clusters. Aunt Eleanor was there, leaning slightly on the arm of her husband, a shadow of the vibrant woman I remembered from childhood summers. Her hair, once fiery and untamed, was now the color of ash, pulled back in a meticulous knot. When our eyes met, there was a flicker of something I couldn't name, a mixture of sorrow, guilt, and something else, something sharp beneath her usual calm veneer. I forced a polite smile, which she returned with the faintest of nods before her gaze slid away. The room smelled faintly of lilies, their white petals stark against the deep mahogany of the casket that sat like a dark, impossible presence at the front of the church. Mom lay inside, so serene and unfamiliar, her face pale and smooth, almost as though sleep had claimed her rather than death. I could hear the low, shaky breaths of those around me, the quiet sniffles and the muffled sobs that filled the space between prayers. My chest tightened. I had never imagined walking into this room without her laughter bouncing off the walls, without the smell of her perfume, or the warmth of her hand on mine. My cousins were there too, scattered in groups that whispered quietly among themselves. I didn't know whether to join them or to find a lonely corner, so I hovered near the edge, watching, absorbing, trying not to let the grief spill over. And then, through the crowd, I saw her, Aunt Eleanor again, slipping past the mourners with a grace that seemed rehearsed, almost too perfect. She came closer, and before I could stop her, her hand rested lightly on my shoulder. "Shh," she whispered, and I instinctively leaned closer. Her voice was a ghost of its former timbre, fragile yet forceful, carrying a weight that made me shiver. "You need to know—" Her words faltered, then rushed out like a flood breaking a dam. It wasn't an accident. The air went thick. My stomach lurched. I wanted to laugh, to protest, to tell her she was mistaken, but no words came. My mind scrambled for sense, for logic, for something, anything, that could anchor me to reality. "What do you mean?" I finally managed, my voice barely more than a trembling whisper. She glanced around, making sure no one could hear, her eyes sharp and urgent. "They don't want you to know, not yet. But it wasn't natural. Mom, she didn't just die. Time fractured. The church, the mourners, the casket, it all seemed to tilt, like the world had shifted on its axis. My knees weakened. I clutched the back of a pew to steady myself, but Eleanor's hand remained on my shoulder, anchoring me to the moment, tethering me to the impossible truth she had just dropped. "Who? What are you saying?" I choked, my heart hammering. Her lips tightened. "I can't tell you here, not now. You'll have to trust me. Later. Tonight, when you're alone, you'll understand." And just like that, she was gone, slipping back into the crowd, leaving me stunned, reeling, grappling for air. The service began, and I went through the motions mechanically. Words were spoken, prayers were recited, hymns hummed softly through the cathedral's high ceiling, but all of it was background noise. My mind was a storm, replaying her words, trying to dissect the meaning behind them, trying to figure out if it was grief talking or if there was something truly sinister hiding in the shadows of my mother's sudden death. Afterward, people approached me with polite condolences, offering hugs that I couldn't feel, words that I couldn't hear. I nodded and murmured thank yous, all while glancing over my shoulder, searching for Eleanor, needing her to explain, to justify, to calm the panic that had set fire to my chest. But she was gone, and the weight of her whisper pressed down on me, unbearable and unrelenting. I left the church with my father, who was still shaking visibly, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. He didn't speak, not a word, the silence between us thick with grief and unasked questions. I wanted to tell him, to ask him if he knew, if he had always known, but something in me held back. A strange instinct telling me that the truth was far more dangerous than we could bear in that moment. Back at the house, the funeral guests had begun to leave, and the rooms that had once been filled with laughter and life were now heavy with absence. The walls, adorned with photographs of happier times, seemed to close in, reflecting back a grief I couldn't escape. I wandered into Mom's study, a small room lined with bookshelves and the faint smell of her favorite tea. The window was open just slightly, letting in the rain-soaked air, and the gray light painted everything in muted tones of sorrow. I found myself at her desk, her hands still resting where she had left them. The pen she had used to jot notes for her garden club meeting still lying next to a half-empty notebook. It was surreal, like stepping into a world paused mid-motion, frozen before the end. And then I remembered Eleanor's words, that whisper that had cut deeper than grief itself. I tried to push it aside, tried to convince myself that grief made people see shadows where there were none, that maybe she was imagining things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, that some hidden truth was waiting to be unearthed, and that the key to it all rested somewhere in this house, in the silent rooms where my mother's life had once unfolded. The hours passed, the rain outside thickening into a relentless downpour. Dinner came and went, a blur of faces and murmurs, but I felt detached, as though I were observing everything through a fogged window. And then, when the house had grown quiet, when the last of the guests had finally gone, I found myself unable to resist. I needed answers, and the only person who had given me even a hint of them was Eleanor. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed her number. It rang once, twice, before she answered in a voice so calm it belied the storm I knew was waiting. "You're alone?" she asked. I need to know. What did you mean? About Mom?" There was a pause, and then she said softly, "Meet me at the old pier. Midnight. No one else." I felt my pulse quicken. The pier was abandoned most nights, a place where the wind cut through your clothes and the water lapped dark and cold against the pilings. It was the perfect place for secrets to hide, the perfect place for revelations to tear the world apart. I hung up, my thoughts a whirlwind. Part of me screamed that this was insane, that meeting her in the middle of the night was dangerous, that maybe I should wait, maybe I should let the grief settle. But the whisper had lodged itself deep in my mind, and nothing could keep me from pursuing it. The drive to the pier was a blur of headlights cutting through rain, the windshield wipers dragging rhythmically across the glass, mirroring the rhythm of my own racing heart. When I arrived, the pier was shrouded in mist, the lamps casting pools of weak yellow light that barely reached the edges. Eleanor was there, her figure half hidden by the fog, and she turned as I approached, her face pale, almost luminous under the dim glow. "You came," she said simply. No relief, no surprise, just a statement, as though she'd expected me to, as though she had known all along. "Yes," I said, my voice tight. "Tell me. Now." She looked out over the water for a long moment, her profile sharp against the gray, then she finally spoke. "There's something you've never been told about your mother, something she kept hidden, something she shouldn't have known herself." I felt a chill creep down my spine. The rain, the pier, the darkness, it all seemed to shrink around us, leaving only the two of us suspended in a moment of dread and revelation. And then she said the words that would change everything I thought I knew about my mother, about my family, about myself. But that is a story that begins not with grief, but with betrayal. The fog clung to us like a living thing, thick and suffocating, carrying the brine of the water and the sharp sting of rain. I shivered, not entirely from the cold. Eleanor turned fully to me then, and for a long moment I could see the storm in her eyes, the kind that had been there the day she whispered those words in the church, hidden beneath her carefully measured calm. She didn't die by accident, Eleanor began, her voice low, almost reverent, as if saying it too loudly might make it vanish. Someone wanted her gone. Someone. Close to you. I staggered back, disbelief washing over me like the waves breaking against the pier below. What? No, that's impossible. Who would... My voice cracked. My mind was scrambling, flipping through every memory I had of my mother, searching for the faintest hint that could explain this nightmare. Your father, Eleanor said quietly, almost too quietly. He didn't mean to... Not in the way you're thinking. But the truth is buried in lies he's told for years. My chest tightened, and the rain seemed to press down harder. My father? The man who had held me when I scraped my knees. The man who had kissed my forehead every night without fail. He had killed Mom? It was unthinkable. Yet Eleanor's voice carried the weight of certainty, a gravity I couldn't ignore. I don't understand, I whispered, gripping the edge of the pier as though it might anchor me to sanity. He loved her. He loved her. I know, Eleanor said. I know, and that's why it's complicated. He didn't plan it, not exactly, but he knew things about your mother, things that could ruin everything he built, things your mother found out, things she shouldn't have. I wanted to argue, to demand clarity, but the words died on my tongue. My mother, my bright, laughing, warm mother, what could she have known that made her death necessary? I wanted to cry out for her, to curse the world for taking her, but the storm of Eleanor's revelation left me frozen, trapped in the space between disbelief and horror. She discovered him, Eleanor continued, stepping closer. Her coat was soaked through, clinging to her like a second skin. She discovered the truth about who he really is, what he's capable of, and she confronted him. I shook my head violently. No, that's not possible. He's my dad. He couldn't... My voice broke and I couldn't finish the sentence. I wanted to scream, but all that escaped was a hollow, ragged sound swallowed by the wind. Eleanor's gaze softened, almost tenderly. I wish it weren't true. I really do. But I saw the aftermath. The night she died, I was there in the shadows, trying to stop him from making a terrible mistake. But it was too late. She wasn't supposed to survive that confrontation. My stomach turned over violently. I grabbed my head, feeling dizzy, sick, as if the very world had flipped upside down. Stop talking. I can't believe this. Then you will have to, Eleanor said, a hard edge creeping back into her voice. Because if you don't understand what happened, if you don't see it for yourself, you'll never be safe. He's not the man you think he is. And he's watching you, even now. A cold, creeping terror slithered through me. Watching me? My father? No, it couldn't be. It had to be a warning, a way to keep me under control. But Eleanor's eyes, so grave, betrayed no deceit. They were the eyes of someone who had seen horrors that couldn't be unseen. I staggered back a step, the wooden boards slick beneath my feet. I need proof, I whispered. I can't just believe this because you said it. Show me. Show me something that proves this. Eleanor hesitated, then reached into her coat and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook, its edges frayed, soaked by the rain. She handed it to me with trembling hands. She wrote everything down. Every suspicion, every conversation, every fear. This is her record. Read it, and you'll understand why she had to die. My fingers shook as I took the notebook, the leather cold and slick in my hands. I opened it to the first page, and the handwriting, so familiar, so undeniably hers, spilled across the paper. My breath caught. It was Mom's voice, alive in ink, whispering truths I had never dared imagine. The first entry was mundane enough, a list of errands, appointments, but as I turned the pages, the tone shifted. Notes of worry, observations of strange behavior from my father, subtle inconsistencies in his stories, strange phone calls that went unanswered, and then, buried further, confessions written as if she were talking to herself. I don't know how to tell him, how to confront him without making him angry. I see it now, the things he's done, the lies he's told. He thinks I don't know, but I do. I can't stay silent. I can't let him manipulate everything around him, not anymore. My hands trembled violently as I read. I couldn't breathe. The notebook felt heavy, a weight pressing down on me like the storm itself had descended onto the pier. "See," Eleanor said quietly, her eyes never leaving mine. She knew. She knew the truth about your father, and that's why she died. Not because of an accident, not because of fate, because she tried to expose him. The words echoed in my head. Every memory of my father suddenly seemed tinged with a shadow I'd never noticed. The late-night phone calls he claimed were work. The secrecy. The sudden trips he refused to explain. Could it all have been a cover for something darker? I wanted to scream, to confront him, but Eleanor's next words stopped me. "He's clever," she said. "He knows how to hide what he's done. If you confront him too soon, if you confront him without proof, he'll know, and then you'll be next." I felt a chill so deep it seemed to freeze my very blood. Next. The word echoed in the storm around us. My mother, taken. And now, me. "Then what do I do?" I whispered, clutching the notebook as though it were a lifeline. "Tell me, I can't just wait." Eleanor looked away, towards the black water stretching endlessly into the fog. "You need to understand everything first. You need to know what he's capable of, what he's hidden. Only then can you act, and you'll need help. People who aren't afraid, people who know what he really is." I felt my mind spinning, trying to process everything she had told me. My father, a man I had loved, trusted, was capable of something so dark, so unimaginable. And Mom, my mother, had discovered it. She had tried to fight it, and now she was gone. I sank to the edge of the pier, the notebook trembling in my lap, the rain soaking through my clothes, my hair plastered to my skull. The world felt unreal, distorted, as if I were trapped in someone else's nightmare. "Will you help me?" I asked, my voice breaking, my eyes locked on Eleanor. "I've been trying to protect you," she said, "but you're too close now. You can't ignore it. You have to see it for yourself. Follow the trail she left, and it will be dangerous, worse than you can imagine. But if you want the truth, if you want justice for her, you have to keep going." The wind whipped around us, carrying the sharp tang of the sea. I looked down at the notebook again, at my mother's words, and felt a surge of determination, mingled with fear so raw it burned. I didn't understand everything yet, not fully. But one thing was clear. My life had changed forever the moment Eleanor had whispered those words in the church. And now, the real journey, the one Mom had started, and one that Eleanor was forcing me to finish, was just beginning. I closed the notebook, gripping it tightly, my knuckles white. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll find out the truth, no matter what it takes." Eleanor nodded, her expression softening just slightly. "Good, because once you start, there's no turning back. Not now, not ever. Not." The fog thickened, swallowing the pier, the water, the distant lights of the town behind us. I felt as though I had stepped into a shadowed world, one where nothing was certain, and where every familiar face could hide a threat. The notebook burned against my chest, a reminder of the mother I had lost, the father I might never recognize, and the secrets that could unravel everything I thought I knew about my life. And somewhere deep in the dark waters below, I felt the weight of her absence, of the whisper that had begun this terrifying descent into truth. I didn't yet know what awaited me, but I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. The drive home from the pier was silent, the rain still hammering against the windshield, each drop a small drum beat echoing my pounding heart. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt, the notebook clutched against my chest, a fragile tether to the truth I was only beginning to grasp. My mind was spinning, replaying Eleanor's words, her warnings, the weight of everything she had revealed. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark and empty, the storm outside masking the usual quiet hum of life. I left the car running for a moment, my chest heaving, the notebook open on my lap. I could feel the past days, the weeks, the months pressing down on me. Not just Mom's death, but the memories of a life I thought I knew, now twisting into something unrecognizable. I carried the notebook inside, the pages damp but intact. The house smelled faintly of candles and wet wood, a reminder of how quickly life could become hollow. I sat at the kitchen table, the lamp casting a circle of light on the notebook as if illuminating a map of secrets. I turned to the first entry about something I hadn't noticed before. A series of financial transactions, late-night calls, unexplained absences. At first they seemed innocuous, almost mundane. But as I read further, patterns emerged. Patterns that suggested deception, manipulation, and a darkness I hadn't imagined could exist in the man I called Dad. I couldn't breathe. Each line of Mom's handwriting was a heartbeat echoing from the past, a warning that had gone unheeded until now. And then I realized I had to confront someone who could help me see the pieces clearly, someone who wasn't entangled in my father's lies. Eleanor. I called her immediately. I need to know what to do next, I said when she picked up, my voice trembling. Where do I start? Meet me at the library, she said, her voice calm, measured. Midnight. There's something there you need to see. Something your mother left behind, hidden. It's the key to everything. I felt a chill creep over me. The library? I asked, incredulous. Why the library? Because she trusted it, Eleanor said simply. Because she wanted to make sure no one could destroy it. Not him, not anyone. And if you're going to uncover the truth, that's where you start. The hours until midnight crawled by like crawling insects. I barely ate, barely slept, consumed by the need to understand. By the time I reached the library, the storm had subsided, leaving the streets slick and glistening under the dim glow of streetlights. The building loomed before me, its stone facade imposing, silent as if holding its breath. Inside, the library was deserted. The only sound, the distant hum of the central heating and the soft echo of my footsteps on the polished wooden floor. Eleanor was waiting in the shadows, her figure almost spectral in the dim light. You found it, I whispered, more to myself than to her. Yes, she said. Follow me. She led me to a corner of the library where the oldest books were kept, shelves towering, packed tight with dusty volumes that smelled of mildew and forgotten time. She paused in front of a narrow shelf near the back, pulling out a small, unassuming book bound in black leather. This belonged to your mother, she said, handing it to me. She kept a journal here, one she never wrote in openly at home. She was afraid it would be found by him. But she recorded things here, things she couldn't say anywhere else. I took the book carefully, my hands trembling. The cover was cool, almost icy to the touch, and as I opened it, I realized that this was different from the notebook. This was methodical, detailed, almost clinical. There were names, dates, locations, diagrams, evidence. I read about conversations I had never known, encounters with strangers who seemed ordinary but weren't, meetings she had attended under the guise of errands or social events. Slowly, a pattern emerged. My father wasn't just hiding personal secrets. He was systematically covering something much larger, a network of deception that stretched further than I could have imagined. Look at this, Eleanor said softly, pointing to a page filled with addresses and names. These people, they're all connected to him. She traced them. She knew what he was capable of, and she was trying to stop him. I felt a shiver of fear, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. How? How could she have thought she could stop him? She didn't think she could, Eleanor admitted, but she hoped to expose him, to make the truth public. And that's why he had to silence her. I felt a wave of nausea. So, he killed her? The words were barely audible, as if speaking them aloud might make the reality too tangible. No, Eleanor said firmly, not in the straightforward sense. He didn't plan it like a criminal, but he created the conditions, the pressure, the confrontation. She confronted him, and it spiraled out of control. That's why it looked like an accident. I wanted to argue, to reject it, to tell myself it couldn't be true, but the evidence in my hands was undeniable. The careful entries, the names, the dates, All of it painted a picture too vivid to ignore. We spent hours in that corner of the library, going over the journal, connecting dots, tracing movements, and reconstructing a timeline. Each revelation was a hammer blow, reshaping my understanding of my father, of my mother, of my own past. I realized how little I had known, how much had been hidden from me, and how dangerous the world I thought I understood really was. "You have to be careful," Eleanor said as the first light of dawn began to filter through the tall windows. "Once you start exposing the truth, he'll notice. He always notices, and he won't hesitate to protect himself." "I understand," I said, though the truth terrified me. "I'll be careful, but I can't stop now. Not after this." She nodded. "Good, because stopping now means losing her all over again." I left the library with the journal in my bag, the weight of it pressing against my side like a living thing. The streets were empty, the city just beginning to stir, and I felt a strange sense of isolation. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every face a potential threat. I knew I had to move fast to uncover what my mother had started before my father realized I had her evidence. Back at home, I pored over the documents, cross-referencing entries from the notebook and the journal. Slowly, a map of deception unfolded, revealing a network of lies, betrayals, and manipulations that stretched back years. My father was not just hiding personal secrets. He was orchestrating them, manipulating events and people with a precision that made my blood run cold. Then I found something that made me freeze. A letter hidden between pages, not addressed to me but clearly meant to be found. The handwriting was my mother's, but the words were desperate, fearful, and coded. "If anything happens to me, trust no one. Not even those who claim to help. Start with the library, start with Eleanor. But know this, the truth is bigger than you. He is watching. He always watches." I read the letter again and again, the words sinking into me like ice water. My mother had known she was in danger, had prepared me, had prepared someone to carry on her fight. And now that someone was me. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the full picture was still beyond reach. I knew the next steps would be dangerous. I knew the stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. But I also knew I couldn't stop. Not if I wanted justice for my mother, not if I wanted to survive. I glanced at the clock. Midnight would come again soon. Another meeting with Eleanor, another piece of the puzzle revealed. And I realized that for the first time, fear and determination were fused into something unstoppable. My father's secrets were out there, hidden in plain sight. And the closer I got to them, the more dangerous my world became. But I had no choice. The moment of truth was coming, and I would face it, no matter the cost. And somewhere deep inside me, I felt my mother's presence, guiding me, urging me forward. The whisper that had started it all, Eleanor's revelation, the storm of grief and fear, they were no longer just events. They were a call to action. The hunt had begun. Days passed like a fever dream. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, and every time I saw my father, every time he smiled or made small talk, a cold knot formed in my stomach. I watched him closely now, noticing things I had never questioned before. The way he answered phone calls, the way he avoided eye contact when certain names came up, the way he seemed to measure every word he spoke. The man I thought I knew had become a stranger, a predator hiding in plain sight. Eleanor became my anchor. We met in secret, always in crowded places where no one would think to look twice, always with the journal and notebook between us. She guided me through Mom's careful notes, showing me patterns I hadn't seen, connections that seemed impossible yet undeniable. Each revelation made my heart pound harder. Each secret uncovered felt like stepping deeper into a labyrinth that had no exit. One evening, she handed me a list of names scrawled in my mother's handwriting. "These are the people who knew pieces of the truth," she said. "Some were witnesses, some were involved, some were enemies. You need to speak to them carefully. One wrong move and your father will know." I stared at the paper, feeling the weight of the danger pressing down on me. "All of them?" I asked, trying to suppress the panic rising in my chest. "Yes, all of them. But start with the easiest. Start with the ones closest, the ones who are least afraid of him. Eleanor's eyes were dark, serious. Time is short. He's not patient, and he watches everything, even now. I left her that night with the first names in my mind, a plan forming like a fragile scaffold in my brain. I had to tread carefully, but I couldn't wait. The first contact was a woman named Clara, a former friend of my mother's who had been privy to several key moments, including some that Mom had hidden in her private journal. Meeting Clara was more nerve-wracking than I anticipated. I found her in a small cafe on the outskirts of town, a place that smelled of stale coffee and old books. She was older than I imagined. Her hair streaked with gray, her eyes tired but sharp. When I introduced myself, she hesitated, her gaze flicking to the door as though checking for someone watching us. You're Mom's child, she said finally, her voice trembling. I thought that was impossible. I need your help, I said, my voice shaking. I know things, dangerous things. My mother kept records, and I have to know the truth. She nodded slowly, her hands wrapped around her cup. Your mother, she was smart. Too smart for some people, I guess. But she trusted you. She wanted you to see this, to finish what she started. But it's dangerous. Dangerous beyond belief. As she spoke, she slid a small envelope across the table. She left this for you. Only you. Inside, you'll find what she discovered about your father. It's everything. I took the envelope with trembling hands, feeling the paper's weight like a promise and a warning combined. I waited until I was alone to open it. Inside were photographs, documents, and handwritten notes that made my stomach churn. Photographs of my father meeting men I didn't recognize, documents suggesting financial manipulation, letters indicating threats, and even photographs of people who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. It became clear my father's reach extended far beyond what I had imagined. He wasn't just hiding personal secrets, he was orchestrating something far darker, something systematic, something that had taken my mother's life in order to protect itself. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I spread everything across my bed, the dim light casting shadows that danced like ghosts across the walls. Every piece of evidence was a revelation, a puzzle piece that painted my father as someone I had never known, someone terrifying in his precision and control. Then came the first real confrontation. I wasn't careful enough. I hadn't anticipated the depth of his awareness. One evening, as I returned home from meeting Eleanor, I found him sitting in the living room, an unreadable expression on his face. The notebook and photographs were hidden in my bag, but I could feel his eyes on me, sharp and probing. Where have you been? He asked casually, but the edge in his voice betrayed him. I went out, I stammered. Just walking. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Walking, huh? At night? I swallowed, forcing myself to appear calm. Yes. He leaned back, studying me as if trying to measure my thoughts. The tension was unbearable. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, calculating, assessing, waiting for me to slip. You've changed, he said finally. Something happened. I've been thinking, I said slowly, choosing my words like walking on a knife's edge. About Mom, about everything. His gaze darkened, and I knew he suspected more than I was willing to admit. But he didn't press further that night, not overtly. Instead, he retreated to his study, leaving me shaken, aware that every step I took, every action I made, was being watched, calculated, and judged. I realized then that my investigation had to become more covert, more strategic. I couldn't make a single mistake. Eleanor became my strategist, guiding me through this hidden war with a precision that was almost military in its execution. We contacted witnesses discreetly, gathered documents, and started building a case piece by piece, like constructing a fragile scaffolding under a storm. But the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. Threats appeared in subtle ways, a car parked too long near my house, strange calls that ended when I picked up, emails that seemed innocuous but carried a silent warning. It was as though the walls themselves were whispering that my father's reach extended everywhere and he would stop at nothing to protect himself. Then came the first twist I hadn't anticipated. One of the people my mother had trusted, a lawyer who had been helping her quietly, contacted me. His voice was tight, filled with fear. "I've been waiting," he said. "Your father knows you're digging. He knows you have proof, and he'll do anything to stop it, but there's more. He's not the only one." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "The people he works with, the people who help him cover everything, they're dangerous, and some are closer than you think. People you've known all your life, people you trust." The words hit like a punch to the gut. I realized with horror that the web of lies wasn't just my father's. It extended into people I had never suspected, people whose loyalty could turn on a dime. My mother's warnings, Eleanor's guidance, the journal, the photographs, they were all not just evidence, but survival tools. That night, I barely slept. The darkness of my room seemed alive, shadows moving just at the edge of vision. The feeling that I was being watched so intense, it made my skin crawl. Every sound, creaking floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant howl of wind, made me jump. I knew my father was calculating, but I also knew that with Eleanor's help, I could outmaneuver him. I just had to be smarter, faster, and unrelenting. And yet, even with all the planning, I couldn't shake the gnawing suspicion. There was something my mother hadn't told me, something she had discovered in her final days that was more dangerous than I had imagined. Eleanor had hinted at it but refused to elaborate. That secret, hidden in plain sight, was the final piece of the puzzle. And I had a sinking feeling that uncovering it would shatter everything I thought I knew. I closed the notebook, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. The fight had begun in earnest. I wasn't just seeking the truth anymore. I was fighting for survival, for justice, for my mother's memory, and for my own life. And somewhere in the shadows of our carefully constructed plans, the first seeds of betrayal had already taken root. The days blurred together in a haze of planning, fear, and sleepless nights. Eleanor and I had mapped every detail we could find, piecing together Mom's meticulous records and tracing my father's steps like detectives following a shadow. Every name, every address, every meeting became a thread we tugged at carefully, aware that a single wrong move could shatter everything. Finally, the breakthrough came. A call from one of Mom's trusted contacts led us to a small storage unit on the outskirts of town. It was unremarkable, hidden behind a chain-link fence, but inside was a trove of documents, photos, and recordings that my mother had gathered over the years. Evidence that not only confirmed my father's manipulations, but revealed the scale of what he had orchestrated. Fraud, coercion, intimidation, enough to destroy lives and reputations if exposed. And in the center of it all was my mother's final confrontation, the one that had set everything in motion. I remember standing in that dusty storage unit, the musty smell of paper and mildew filling my lungs, clutching the journals and recordings as though they were lifelines. Eleanor stood beside me, her eyes scanning the stacks of boxes with a mixture of reverence and unease. "She left everything," I whispered. "She really left everything." "Yes," Eleanor said softly. "She trusted you to finish it, to make sure the truth saw the light." And then I saw it. A file labeled with Mom's handwriting, final evidence. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were documents directly tying my father to the events that had led to her death, alongside photographs of meetings, transactions, and even threats he had issued to people who might expose him. But there was something else, something more personal, a recorded confession. My mother's voice, shaky but determined, documenting every detail of what she had discovered, every confrontation, every warning she had given him, every step that had led to that fateful day. I pressed play. Her voice filled the tiny unit, trembling at first but gaining strength as she recounted the events. My father's manipulation, the people he had used, the threats he had issued, and her own attempts to shield me from the fallout. And then, toward the end, she said something that froze me. "If you are listening to this, you are my only chance. Trust no one." not even those you think you can. He watches everything. He is everywhere. But if you can find the courage, you can end it. You can make him accountable. And remember, it is never just about justice, it's about surviving the truth. I felt a wave of grief, fury, and resolve crash over me. The room seemed to tilt, the air heavy with the weight of her words. She had known it would be dangerous. She had known it could cost her life. And she had done it anyway, leaving me the tools to finish what she started. We left the storage unit that night with evidence in hand, careful to avoid surveillance and potential traps. But I knew the confrontation was inevitable. I had to face him, my father, not with anger alone, but with proof, with clarity, and with the unshakable weight of Mom's legacy behind me. The night of the confrontation was silent, the air thick with tension. He was sitting in the living room when I arrived, calm, collected, a faint smile playing at his lips, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He knew, he always knew. "Why are you here?" he asked smoothly, his tone almost casual. "I know everything," I said, placing the stack of documents and recordings on the table between us. "I know what you did. I know how you manipulated people, how you hid the truth, and I have proof." His smile faltered slightly. "Proof? Do you think that changes anything? You have pieces of paper, a few recordings, and you think you can destroy me?" I felt my heart racing, my palms slick with sweat. "Not think. No, you manipulated Mom. You caused her death, and now your lies end." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in him, a shadow of the man I had once trusted. The confidence that had always masked his cruelty wavered. He lunged for the papers, but I held them back, stepping closer, every nerve in my body alert. "You don't understand," he hissed. "This goes beyond us, beyond your mother. There are people, dangerous people. You can't fight them alone." "I'm not alone," I said, my voice firm, steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Eleanor stepped into view, her presence solid and unwavering, a silent shield against his intimidation. "And you don't control me anymore. This ends tonight." The confrontation was tense, charged with years of unspoken lies, half-truths, and deception. He tried to argue, to manipulate, to twist the story as he had so many times before. But I had the evidence, the narrative Mom had left, and the strength of truth. Every lie he told crumbled against the weight of what she had documented. Finally defeated and exposed, he sank into the armchair, his face pale, eyes darting as if searching for escape. You don't understand what you're doing," he whispered, almost to himself. "I understand perfectly," I said. "And now everyone else will, too." The aftermath was quiet but not peaceful. Law enforcement, guided by the evidence we had gathered, began to investigate. People who had been threatened or silenced slowly came forward, corroborating Mom's discoveries. My father's network began to unravel one thread at a time. I watched from a distance, feeling a strange mix of vindication, sorrow, and exhaustion. Justice was being served, but at a cost I could never forget. Weeks later, I sat alone in Mom's study, the rain tapping gently against the window. The house was quiet, filled with memories and echoes of laughter now gone. I opened her notebook again, reading her words, her voice reaching across time. I realized that her greatest gift wasn't the evidence she left or the secrets she uncovered. It was the courage to face the truth, to stand against something terrifying, and to empower me to do the same. I closed the notebook and leaned back in the chair, letting the silence settle around me. The storm had passed, but its effects lingered. The truth had been revealed, the danger had been confronted, but the scars, emotional, psychological, and moral, remained. And as I reflected on the journey, I asked myself questions I knew the audience would feel just as keenly as I did. How far would you go to uncover the truth about someone you love? How do you reconcile the people you trust with the darkness they might conceal? And when the safety of those you care for is at stake, what choices would you make to protect them, even if it means walking a path filled with fear, betrayal, and uncertainty? Mom's whisper, Eleanor's guidance, and my father's betrayal had shown me the fragility of trust, the complexity of love, and the courage it takes to confront what we fear most. And though the story had reached its climax, the questions it left behind were eternal, echoing in every shadow, in every unspoken secret, in every life touched by hidden truths. The house was silent, the rain a gentle reminder that life continues, even after revelations and confrontations. I knew I would carry the weight of these events forever, but I also knew that Mom's legacy, the courage to seek truth and demand accountability, would guide me always. And as the night deepened, I felt her presence in the quiet, in the whispers of memory, and in the knowledge that even in death she had given me everything I needed to survive the darkness and to finally see the world as it truly was. As you leave this story behind, ask yourself, how well do we truly know the people closest to us? When faced with secrets and betrayals, what would you risk to uncover the truth? How much of your trust is earned and how much is assumed? And finally, if the shadows of deception lurk in the lives around you, would you have the courage to confront them or to walk away knowing some truths are too dangerous to face?